What happens when a cop pulls a gun on a black woman only to realize she's the FBI director? This is not just a story of survival, it's a story of power accountability and a reckoning that shook the system. The hum of highway asphalt beneath her tires had become a familiar companion to Director Alina Mercer, appointed just 4 months ago as the youngest black woman to lead a regional FBI division. She knew what pressure meant. Tonight was supposed to be her wind-down drive returning from a high-level counter-intel briefing in Atlanta, her thoughts still wrapped around encrypted chatter and surveillance anomalies. She wasn't dressed like a director. No blazer, no slacks, just jeans, a dark zip-up hoodie and sneakers, the kind of clothes that made her feel human again, the kind of clothes people didn't associate with power. Her badge and federal ID were clipped to her waistband, mostly hidden, but visible enough if someone looked closely. She pulled into a dimly lit Petromax gas station just off Route 319. It was nearly midnight, the overhead bulbs flickering like nervous eyes. As she sat in her car taking a breath before stepping out, a sudden splash of red and blue lights flooded her rearview mirror. Her brows furrowed. No siren, just lights. Her speed, a perfect 65. No lane drifting, no swerving. No taillight out. Her instincts didn't scream, but they whispered, "This isn't right." Still, she did what she always did, followed protocol. She turned off the engine, placed both hands on the wheel, and waited. The patrol car didn't move for a long beat, then the door opened. A man emerged, tall, pale, and square-jawed, moving like someone used to being obeyed without question. His fingers hovered near his holster as he approached. Alina cracked her window, kept her voice steady. "Good evening, officer. I'm Director Alina Mercer, FBI." She angled her badge into the light. The man's flashlight lingered too long on her face, then came the smirk. The kind you saw just before things got ugly. License and registration. No acknowledgement, no courtesy, no explanation. Alina paused. "May I ask the reason for the stop?" His voice sharpened. "You heard me, license registration." Now she spoke slowly, clearly. "My ID and badge are on my left hip. My driver's license is in my purse on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach slowly." She moved. No sudden gestures, just textbook calm. But the second his eyes glanced over her badge, the smirk turned hostile. "FBI, huh?" He laughed under his breath. "Sure you are." Then just like that, he unholstered his gun. The glint of the barrel caught the flicker of the station lights. The air inside her car turned razor thin. And Alina knew this wasn't a stop. It was a message. Officer Gage Trask didn't just aim the gun. He leaned into it, letting the barrel speak louder than any badge Alina could show him. She'd seen men like this before. Not in war zones, in boardrooms, in locker rooms, in courtrooms. The kind who didn't need orders to act, just a moment of perceived authority. Alina's hand stayed high, unmoving. "I am unarmed," she said, voice like tempered steel. "I am a federal agent. My weapon is in a locked case in the trunk, per policy. You are currently aiming a loaded firearm at a senior official of the FBI. Think about that." But Gage wasn't thinking. His eyes were wild with suspicion, or maybe power. He moved closer. She could hear gravel crunch beneath his boots. The flashlight blinded her again. "I don't care if you're the Queen of DC, he spat out of the car. Now across the gas station, a teen near the vending machine froze mid-step, his bottle of Gatorade forgotten. A woman in a minivan pulled out her phone. Alina didn't move an inch. "You're making a mistake," she repeated, calmer this time, "and the country will see it happen in real time." The officer's lip curled. "That a threat, lady?" Before she could answer, the low rumble of another cruiser rolled in behind his. More red and blue lights splashed across the pumps. Another silhouette stepped out. Taller, bulkier, no name tag, no radio chatter. Silent coordination. Alina's stomach dropped. This wasn't protocol. This was protection for him. The second officer stayed back a few steps, but flanked her left. A classic pincer move. "Problem here?" the second one asked, voice lazy. "Just a non-compliant female," Trask said, without looking away from her. "Thinks she can flash some fake credentials and get out of a stop, ma'am," the second officer said, tone dead. "Exit the vehicle, now. Not director, not agent, just ma'am." Generic stripped of title of identity. Alina nodded once. She understood the terrain now. These men weren't looking for proof. They were looking for submission. She exaggerated every motion, slowly opened her door, slowly placed her boots on the pavement, slowly raised her hands higher than before. Gas station lights buzzed, cameras pointed. The night pulsed with tension. She wasn't alone, but she was surrounded. The moment Alina stood, Officer Trask moved in like he'd been waiting for it. He circled her like a predator gauging weakness, but she had none to give. He snatched her badge from her waistband, examined it under the light, and then tossed it on the hood of her car like trash. Dollar store knockoff, he muttered loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. She didn't flinch. Inside, her blood boiled. Not because he questioned her, but because he needed to believe she didn't belong in that badge, that authority, that power. It threatened him more than any weapon ever could. "You're interfering with a federal operation," she said firmly. "I am requesting immediate contact with your supervisor." "No one's coming to save you," Trask sneered. Then came the shove. Not enough to bruise, but enough to demean, to make her stumble back against her own vehicle. The second officer stayed back, watching complicit. Someone in the crowd shouted. "She showed her badge, man." "We saw it," but Trask didn't care. The badge meant nothing to him. The woman holding her phone whispered, "Oh my God, he's going to shoot her." And that possibility, Alina knew wasn't paranoid. It was math. "Turn around," Trask barked. Alina didn't. "You haven't told me why I'm being detained." "Suspicious behavior," he replied. She narrowed her eyes. "What behavior?" He hesitated too long. Then, like flipping a script, he grabbed her wrist and twisted hard. Her knees buckled. She caught herself before falling. "I think she's resisting," Trask called out. The second officer stepped closer. "We have a non-compliant suspect." Suspect. Not citizen. Not director. Not agent. Just a single word to flip a narrative. The gun came out again. Now it was inches from her face. Her pulse didn't spike. She was trained for this, but her rage did. She wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking of names, reports, lives ended in moments just like this. She had studied the files. Now she was inside one. Then, "Hey, I'm recording this." A man's voice cut through the night. "Firm clear him." His phone up. Flashlight beam, capturing everything. "You sure you want to do this, officer?" the man called out. Trask turned momentarily disoriented. Alina didn't move, but she saw it in their eyes. The dynamic had shifted, and the clock was now ticking against them. Trask's arm faltered, not lowered, not withdrawn, but the arrogance drained slightly as his eyes adjusted to the new variable. A witness. Not one hiding behind a windshield, but a man standing out in the open, steady hands, camera. Rolling voice controlled. "I said back off," Trask shouted, but his voice cracked, just a hair. The second officer stiffened. He looked at the man with the phone, then at Alina. He was calculating risk optics rank. "You touch that man," Alina said loudly, clearly, "and I will have both of you indicted for obstruction of justice before sunrise." The second officer froze mid-step. His hand had been moving to his belt, maybe to reach for his own weapon, or maybe to grab the phone. Either way, he stopped. Trask turned back to her. His gun was still raised but lower now, hovering near her chest instead of her face. "You think you're in control," he spat. "No!" Alina said, her voice stronger than ever, "but I think you just lost it." The sound of sirens came next, not theirs, but others. Louder, multiple, not just local. And Trask knew someone had called someone bigger. And they were almost here. The flashing red and blue became a flood. Two black SUVs with government plates tore into the gas station doors, already swinging open before the wheels had fully stopped. Out stepped four agents, two men, two women, badges up, weapons holstered, but ready. One of them, Agent Noah Garrett, walked with a calm fury. He didn't even need to shout. "Federal agents, drop your weapon, now." Trask turned slowly, confused, the word agent hitting him like a slap. He scanned their faces, uncertain. "Still gripping the gun," I said. "Put it down," Garrett repeated louder. The second officer stepped back, palms partially raised. He wasn't ready to be the fall guy. Trask hesitated, not because he feared consequence, but because he couldn't comprehend how quickly he'd lost the narrative. The crowd behind them was silent, phones pointed like weapons. The night air buzzed with consequence. Then a third SUV arrived, and out stepped the one face Trask truly recognized, Special Agent in charge, Marshallin Alina's superior. The moment she appeared, Trask's confidence died, because now the hierarchy was visible, and so were the consequences. Agent Garrett didn't wait for Trask to decide. With swift precision, he closed the gap, twisted Trask's wrist behind his back, and in one smooth motion cuffed him. Trask gasped, half from pain, half from disbelief. "You can't arrest me. I'm a cop," he shouted. "You detained a federal official without cause," Garrett replied coldly. You aimed a firearm at an FBI director and obstructed a federal operation. You're lucky it stops at that. The second officer didn't resist when another agent approached. His hands went behind his back without protest. His eyes never met Alina's. The crowd, dozens, now erupted in murmurs and applause. A few cheered. Others just stood still, stunned by the reversal. The man who had been filming stepped forward slightly. His camera still rolled. "You all right, ma'am?" Alina nodded once. "Thank you for not looking away." Behind her, Trask struggled. "You're making a mistake." "No," she said, turning to face him. "You made it the moment you saw my skin before my badge." His face twisted, not in anger but in something more dangerous: humiliation. He wasn't losing to the system. He was losing in front of it. As the agent secured the scene, collected statements, and coordinated with the arriving sheriff's department, Alina stood still, her back straight, her badge clipped once more to her hip. No longer hidden, no longer in question. The chaos melted behind her as Agent Lynn approached. "You handled it," Lynn said quietly. Alina nodded, her voice dry. "Barely. You stayed alive. That counts." They stood in silence for a moment. "Do you want us to take you in? Or call someone?" "I'll drive," Alina said. "I need to finish this night with my hands on the wheel." Lynn studied her for a moment, then gave a nod of approval. The man with the phone gave her a small salute as she walked past. "The internet's already on fire." "That video's everywhere." "Good," Alina replied. "Let it burn." By the time she pulled into the bureau parking lot, the story had gone national. The footage had spread across every platform: Twitter, TikTok, morning news. Commentators argued over protocol, over race, over whether her hoodie justified the gun. By noon, Officer Trask was officially suspended. By nightfall, charges were pending. The department issued a statement filled with words like review, procedure, and regret. But Alina didn't care about statements. She cared about change, and she knew the system never fixed itself. She walked into her office, set down her keys, and picked up her pen. Because today she survived. Tomorrow she would rebuild. The silence of her office was deceptive, behind the closed door and the bulletproof windows. Alina Mercer sat at her desk, surrounded by a stack of folders she didn't ask for, but now had to face. Her assistant had left them with a note. "All internal affairs requests for today. Yours are on top." Alina opened the first report. It was about Officer Gage Trask. His complaint record spanned 7 years and over 20 documented incidents. Most had been resolved internally. None had ever led to suspension. Until now, she flipped the pages, her jaw tightening at every dismissal, every excuse scrawled in soft language. Suspect misunderstood officer's command. Video footage inconclusive, internal warning issued. It wasn't just him, it was the system that had protected him. And if she hadn't been wearing a badge, if she had been just another woman refueling after a long day, there would be no reports, no video, no arrest. She picked up her phone and dialed. "I want a full review of officer conduct logs across 3 counties," she told her deputy. "I want the names, the patterns, the red flags." If they wanted to pretend this was isolated, fine, she would show them how widespread it really was. By late afternoon, the backlash had arrived. Alina's inbox overflowed with hate mail. Anonymous rants, calls for her resignation, veiled threats wrapped in legal jargon. Some came from citizens. Others, more disturbing, came from law enforcement personnel. Using burner accounts or coded language she was trained to recognize. "You're a disgrace to the badge. You set a dangerous precedent. We don't need political stunts from bureaucrats in hoodies." She read every word, then archived them all. But it was the voicemail that shook her, because it wasn't anonymous. "Director Mercer, this is Senator Aldridge. We need to talk before you escalate this further. There are implications for how this may reflect on regional coordination efforts." She sat still, absorbing that tone. Polished concern cloaked in quiet intimidation. But Alina Mercer didn't owe anyone silence. She owed the public truth, and she owed herself justice. She tapped her finger against the desk, considering her next move. This wasn't just about what happened to her, it was about what happened to the badge every time people like Officer Trask used it to weaponize fear, and the system shrugged it off. Well, not this time. This time the badge would mean something again. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the bureau's mirrored facade, Alina got an unexpected visitor. Her father, retired Army Sergeant Major Leon Mercer, now grayer and quieter than the man who'd raised her, stood in the doorway without speaking. She looked up from her desk. "Surprised, Dad?" He stepped in slowly. "I saw the video." She nodded once, uncertain of what else to say. He didn't sit, just stood studying her like he used to when she came home late from high school. Debates. eyes searching for truth beneath the surface. I remember when you were 10, he said. You asked why I always kept my license and ID on the dashboard when I drove. She smiled faintly. And you said it was easier that way. Safer. I didn't want you to see the fear, he admitted. Now he looked away, the truth too heavy for eye contact. But you saw it anyway, and now you live with it. Alina walked around her desk and embraced him. I'm not afraid, she whispered. You were never afraid, he said. That's what scared me most. And in that moment, the fight became personal all over again. The next morning brought an unexpected shift. A quiet knock on her office door preceded the entrance of Deputy Director Sloan, a career man who had always kept his distance, known more for silence than solidarity. He closed the door behind him and slid a folder onto her desk. Sealed IA transcripts, he said, from precincts outside your jurisdiction. Alina raised an eyebrow. Why are you bringing this to me? Because you're the only one asking the right questions, he said plainly. And because some of us are tired of pretending this doesn't happen. She opened the folder. Dozens of names, case summaries, incidents, covered up evidence, lost supervisors rotating officers instead of disciplining them. Patterns. I can't authorize formal action, he added. But I can give you eyes where you didn't have them before, Alina nodded. Eyes still scanning. What's the catch? No catch, he said. Just don't stop. It wasn't a friendship. It wasn't even alliance. It was survival. And sometimes in the bureau, that was enough. She looked up. Thank you, Sloan. He left without another word, but now she had more than files. She had momentum, and that was a weapon she knew how to wield. That night, Alina stood on the rooftop of the bureau building, watching the city lights blink beneath her like distant warnings. Below her, the world was still spinning. News cycles, fading hashtags mutating, politicians posturing, but none of them knew what came next. She did. The system didn't implode. It resisted, it threatened, reshaped twisted truths into fog. But she had evidence, she had witnesses, she had the law, and more than anything, she had survivors. People who had reached out since the video dropped, anonymous emails, DMs, former agents, retired officers, mothers, sons, all with stories, all with receipts. The dam had cracked, and she wasn't waiting for permission to break it. She turned her phone on and hit record. My name is Alina Mercer, director of the Mid-Atlantic FBI Bureau. She began, what happened to me is not unique, but silence can no longer be the response. If you've been mistreated, if you've been ignored, if you've been afraid to speak, now is your time. I will listen. We will act. The badge is not a shield for injustice. She ended the video, posted it. Then she smiled, not from pride, but from resolve. Tomorrow she'd go to war, and this time the Bureau would follow. Within hours of posting her video, Alina's inbox exploded, not with backlash this time, but with testimonies. Raw, unfiltered, often anonymous. A former paramedic detailing how she was pulled over and interrogated for stealing an ambulance despite being in uniform. A veteran agent admitting he'd been silenced after filing complaints against a superior who used racial slurs on duty. A mother whose teenage son was slammed to the ground by a campus cop for walking home with a hoodie up. They weren't isolated, they were systemic, and they were flooding in. Alina's team now, unofficially expanded with volunteers from other divisions, began compiling them. Cross-referencing, identifying patterns, jurisdiction overlaps, shared offenders. What had started as a single incident was becoming a blueprint for reform. By the end of the day, news outlets had picked up her video. Civil rights attorneys reached out. A senator tweeted his support cautiously but publicly. An officer gauged Trask. His face was everywhere, suspended without pay, stripped of his badge, and now the subject of a grand jury inquiry. But Alina didn't smile. She didn't need revenge. She needed momentum, because justice wasn't about punishing one man. It was about unlearning the culture that created him. Behind closed doors, not everyone supported her crusade at the next agency roundtable. Deputy Administrator Wells made it known. Director Mercer, he began flipping through her report without reading it. I worry about the precedent this sets. What precedent, she asked coolly, that agents can become media figures, that we air dirty laundry instead of resolving matters internally. Alina leaned forward. With respect, sir, the internal process failed. Repeatedly, if I hadn't had a witness, if I weren't the one with a title, I might be dead. Silence, she let it linger. Reform isn't a press release, she added. It's a reckoning, and it's overdue. Wells closed the folder. Just be mindful. The higher the platform, the bigger the fall. Alina met his gaze steady. Then I'll fall standing up. When she left the room, Agent Garrett was waiting. You're making enemies, he warned. She nodded. Good, that means I'm hitting the right nerves. Not everyone wanted the truth, but truth wasn't something Alina sought. It was something she became. Alina received an official invitation 2 days later. It was from the House Judiciary Subcommittee, a hearing on law enforcement accountability and the role of federal oversight. She was asked to testify. It wasn't unexpected, but it still made her pause. Testifying meant going public. Full exposure. A target on her back permanently. She took a moment in her office hand resting on the badge that nearly cost her her life. She thought of her parents, of her team, of that teenage boy in the crowd who saw a federal director treated like a criminal just because she didn't look the part. And she remembered the man with the camera. His voice had saved her. Now hers would save others. When she confirmed her attendance, she also submitted 217 pages of documented complaints, 58 flagged personnel records, and 17 pieces of unreleased footage, all gathered since her roadside stop. The committee staff was stunned. They thought she'd show up with a statement, and instead she was bringing a case Alina wasn't there to perform. She was there to prosecute the silence. The Capitol hearing room was packed. Media cameras lined the back wall. Activists sat in tense rows. Opponents shifted in discomfort. Alina Mercer sat in her dark suit, spine straight, voice unwavering. I'm here today, not just as an FBI director, she began, but as a woman who survived her own badge being invalidated at gunpoint. Gasps, murmurs, she continued. I've reviewed hundreds of misconduct reports, most were buried. I'm submitting a motion for federal review across 14 departments that exhibit chronic patterns of excessive force, racial targeting, and badge misuse. A congressman interrupted Director Mercer. Are you suggesting a federal takeover of local precinct operations? I'm suggesting we stop pretending. Oversight exists when it's optional, she shot back. That made headlines. Her words weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to wake people up, and they did. By week's end, 2 more departments had launched internal investigations. Trask's indictment was formalized. And Alina's clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was undeniable. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She told the truth, and this time the country listened. 6 months later, Alina Mercer stood beneath a new sign, the Mercer Initiative for Law Enforcement Integrity. It wasn't a vanity name, it was a promise. The program provided real-time monitoring tools, third-party auditing teams, and an anonymous complaint app tied to federal channels. 4 states had adopted it. A 5th was voting tomorrow. Alina didn't run it directly anymore. She had returned to her work at the Bureau. But the mission lived on, bigger than her. Louder than one incident, grounded in one truth. Silence doesn't protect the innocent. Visibility does. As she watched a group of new recruits walk through the center's doors, black, brown, white, young, nervous, inspired, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself since that night on the roadside. Hope. Justice hadn't just happened. It had been forced into motion, and it was only the beginning. She placed her badge on her belt one more time and adjusted her jacket and walked out into the light. Because real power isn't pulling rank. It's pulling others up behind you. Power without accountability is a threat. Director Alina Mercer stood tall, not just for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced, every badge abused, and every story erased. Let this remind us all. Justice doesn't begin with punishment. It begins when silence is broken. Keep your cameras rolling. Speak truth, demand better. Because the next life on the line might not come with a badge.